Hello and welcome everyone. Today I want to talk about the currency strategy I'm running at the moment, Incursion Immortal Syndicate farming. The strategy uses one betrayal Scarab of Intelligence, one betrayal Scarab of Reinforcements, one regular Incursion Scarab, two Sacrificial Fragments, and on occasion an Incursion Scarab of Timelines instead of one of these Sacrificial Fragments, but more about that later. You should use Searing Exarch Influence and Quantity as a map mod. I played the strategy in Dunes so I could boss rush for better altars, to get fortress maps, and because open maps are easier to navigate, but you can in theory play this strategy in pretty much any other map as well. In terms of Atlas passives, you want to get all Searing Exarch nodes, most of the Betrayal nodes, with the exception of Bribery, and the Incursion nodes that modify the level of the Incursion rooms, and the number of incursions per map. You also want to get the Scarab nodes that increase the drop chance for valuable Scarabs, and all of the map nodes. This includes the map nodes that scale modify effect, which makes the maps more rewarding, but also more dangerous. If you're short on points or have trouble running the maps, I recommend not allocating mounting modifiers or chiseled perfection, because they're not that important. I also left the link to the Atlas passive tree in the description of this video. As I mentioned before, the influence of choice is Searing Exarch, which we're using to get additional loot via Scarab, map, and currency duplication mods. You also want to lock in altars that enable valuable drops from Eldritch monsters, including more Scarabs and Grand Eldritch Embers. If you can't make use of an altar because the modifiers aren't worth it or the downsides are too dangerous, you can just leave it and activate the less dangerous alternative later after enabling monster drops from a different altar. The Immortal Syndicate has been radically reworked in 3.24, with most of the crafting benches having been removed completely. This means the vast majority of the currency comes from Veiled Orbs that drop from Katarina. On the flip side, this also means we don't have to care about the layout of the Immortal Syndicate much, because it apparently doesn't influence the drop rates of the Veiled Orbs. So instead of meticulously setting up a specific layout, you should try to progress to the mastermind as quickly as possible by first increasing the rank of the various members, followed by interrogating them to run the safe houses as quickly as possible. Most of the rewards you get this way are somewhat underwhelming, but I still put together a safe house ranking for every member that should be considered when assigning them. I've ranked the assignments in this cheat sheet with 1 being the highest and 4 being the lowest priority. You might have noticed that I didn't assign any ranks to Aisling, and that's because all of her rewards are pretty mediocre, so she should only ever be used to gain intelligence for safe house progression. The ranks are subjective to some degree. For example, if you like crafting with Guff's benches, the ranking will look slightly different, but I personally consider this to be a waste of time, which is why I never use them. There are some members which actually give you decent rewards if you assign them appropriately, which is why you should prioritize the assignment over other members. For example, Gravisius gives you 1 or 2 full stacks of divination cards in transportation. Other noteworthy members include Haku to intervention for ambush scarabs, Borichi to research for hover scarabs, Janus to research for expedition reroll currency, and Leo to transportation for catalysts. You should also keep in mind that the rank of the leader is retained after running the safe house, so it can be sensible to put members with valuable rewards in those positions by interrogating the current leader or using the option to become leader of that safe house when it becomes available. The incursion mechanics are a bit more complicated and require some explaining. Upon entering the room, you have to kill one of the two architects to either upgrade or change the type of room, as well as killing enough monsters to find a stone of passage to open up connections to other rooms. The focus should be on unlocking and upgrading two specific rooms, namely the Corruption Chamber and the Gem Cutter Workshop. When upgraded to the Locus of Corruption or Doriani's Institute, the level 3 versions of those rooms, they allow for the double corruption of either one item or a gem, which is unique to the Temple of Atzoatl. Hovering over the architect before entering tells you which one you have to kill in order to upgrade or change rooms. If none of the architects represent one of the target rooms, it's usually sensible to upgrade the level of the resident architect as much as possible due to the Atlas passive contested development, adding the level of the resident architect to the non-resident architect upon changing rooms. This means if you change a random level 1 room to another room, it will immediately be level 2, which speeds up the progress towards valuable level 3 rooms like the Locus of Corruption or Doriani's Institute, respectively. At the beginning of a new cycle, rooms often don't have any architect residing in them, so you can choose pretty much either architect to get started, since most of the rooms don't contribute any real value to the Chronicle even when fully upgraded. Another way of upgrading the level of a target room is by having an adjacent and connected Shrine of Empowerment or one of the higher level versions of it. In order to maximize the possibility for such an occurrence, you should change the Shrine of Empowerment to a different room when it's not connected to one of the target rooms. It's important to note that any specific room can only show up once per map. This only makes sense during the first two maps since cycles consist of 12 incursions or 3 maps. Afterwards, you can either run the temple yourself or take the Chronicle with either option starting a new cycle. You also want to keep the connections between rooms to a bare minimum, so whenever the Shrine of Empowerment is next to one of the target rooms, it's more likely to upgrade them. If the Shrine of Empowerment is adjacent but not connected to a target room, it can't upgrade its level, so make sure to open up a connection between them once they are adjacent to each other. As I mentioned before, I used a couple of Incursion Scarab of Timelines instead of a Sacrificial Fragment on occasion. This creates a chronicle with the current layout of the temple, but with randomized room levels after running the last incursion in the map. Since these scarabs are somewhat expensive, it's only worth doing so when the corruption chamber is present, you've already made a connection, or are at most one connection short from unlocking it. Because the value of chronicles that only have Doriani's Institute are not worth 3 times as much as the scarab, you are actually going to lose currency on average when running the scarabs in a temple that just features the Gemcutter's Workshop or one of its upgrades. If you're missing connections to reach one of the target rooms, you can always change one of the rooms to an explosive room in order to reach it. This is especially valuable at the beginning of a cycle that has a corruption chamber present that can't be reached just yet, allowing the usage of the Incursion Scarab of Timelines earlier than you would normally be able to. Sadly, this doesn't work with connections between target rooms and the Shrine of Empowerment, because the connection has to be made before the temple is run, so you should make these connections as soon as possible. And now for the interesting part, the profit breakdown. I ran 43 maps and a total of 10 masterminds with the corresponding safe houses, which took me 7 hours and 24 minutes, and this is the loot I ended up with. The majority of our profits are coming from Temple Chronicles and raw currency. The rest is mostly scarabs and maps. The currency is pretty much just the two Veiled Orbs, Grand Eldritch Embers, and Chaos Orbs. For the temples, most of the value comes from chronicles that contain the Locus of Corruption, because they're 3.5 times as valuable, and you acquire much more of them due to the Incursion Scarab of Timelines. Map profits are mostly coming from fortress maps, whereas scarabs are a bit all over the place, as one might expect. The consumable costs are 3 chaos for the scarabs and the sacrificial fragments. I chiseled and rolled the maps without targeting a specific quantity, which adds an additional 5 chaos for a total of around 8 chaos per map. I also used a total of 19 Incursion Scarab of Timelines for an additional 570 chaos. This brings the total investment cost to 914 chaos, or 6.6 divs, compared to the 95 divs we found in loot. This equates to a profit of 88.4 divs over 7.4 hours, or roughly 12 divs per hour. Overall pretty decent, although I do want to point out that I found the Veiled Orbs after the last 3 Mastermind fights, so there's a lot of variance in that regard. The strategy also doesn't produce a lot of gold. I only made around 480,000 gold in total, or 65,000 gold per hour. Sadly, this is not enough to support a fully upgraded town, so that's definitely a major drawback. On the flip side, the strategy doesn't require much gear, and the profits can be scaled up by using more powerful and faster characters to speed up the various encounters. And that's pretty much it for the video. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments. I try to get to them as soon as I can. If you want to support my work, connect with me and my community, you can check out my socials including Twitch, Discord, and Patreon on my channel page on the description of this video. I hope you liked it, and I'm going to leave you with one of the maps I ran for the strategy. Until next time.
Time to see how the paupers live, I suppose.
Go on. No, not again.
I'm afraid.
I expect you will come at us with a new strike. Ah, there you are. Time to go. Good job, Exarch. There you are. Time to go. Ah, there you are. Ah, there you are. Ready to revisit the past? The more good job, Exarch. Ah, there you are. Time to go. Good job. You picked the wrong job.
Let's see if you can earn an honorable.
I shall die 1,000 times if
death, Seer.
What's wrong?
If you think
Death is... You've made your show of form. A true servant of God is no...